The Chagos Archipelago, a collection of atolls in the Indian Ocean, first saw human presence with the arrival of Maldivian mariners. These skilled seafarers navigated the vast ocean, reaching the shores of these remote islands. They came for resources, perhaps fishing or coconuts, establishing a connection that would last for centuries. Meanwhile, Mayotte, nestled in the Mozambique Channel, experienced contact with a different group. African traders, sailing the East African coast, encountered this island. They established trade networks, exchanging goods and ideas with the indigenous people. These early interactions demonstrate the strategic importance of these island groups, even in the early days of human exploration. The Chagos Islands, sparsely populated, became a stopping point for passing ships. The Maldivians, with their knowledge of the sea and the islands, played a crucial role in these early interactions. Mayotte, on the other hand, saw more permanent settlements. Bantu-speaking people from Madagascar and the East African coast established communities. They brought with them their culture, their language, and their way of life, shaping the identity of Mayotte. These early encounters, while limited in scope, laid the groundwork for the complex history that would follow. The arrival of Europeans in the 16th century marked a turning point for both archipelagos.
The 18th century saw the arrival of French colonists in the Chagos Archipelago. These early settlers were drawn by the promise of fertile land and the potential for profitable plantations. They established coconut plantations on the islands, exploiting the fertile land for profit. The plantations quickly became the backbone of the local economy, driven by the labor of the Chagosians and imported workers. Their arrival marked the beginning of a long period of colonial rule for the Chagosians. The local population found their lives increasingly dominated by the demands and regulations of the French colonists. In 1810, during the Napoleonic Wars, Great Britain seized control of the islands. This shift in power was part of a larger strategy to dominate key maritime routes and expand British influence in the region. The Chagos Archipelago, considered strategically important due to its location in the Indian Ocean, became a British possession. The British recognized the island's value for naval and commercial purposes. This transfer of power from France to Britain had significant implications for the islands and their people. The Chagosians had to adapt to new rulers and the changing policies that came with British administration.
Mayotte's journey into colonialism took a different path. Unlike the Chagos Archipelago, Mayotte's transition to colonial rule was marked by internal political dynamics and external pressures. In 1841, Andriansoli, the last king of Mayotte, ceded the island to France. This decision was influenced by internal conflicts and the growing influence of European powers in the region. This decision, driven by internal conflicts and the growing influence of European powers, marked the beginning of French rule in Mayotte. The French quickly moved to establish their authority over the island. 2 years later, in 1843, France formally declared Mayotte a French colony. This formal declaration was a significant step in integrating Mayotte into the French colonial empire. This move solidified French control over the island, integrating it into the growing French colonial empire in the Indian Ocean. The French administration began to implement policies to exploit the island's resources. The British, after taking control of the Chagos Archipelago, maintained the existing coconut plantations. They saw the plantations as a valuable economic asset and continued to develop them. They also introduced a system of contract labor, bringing in workers from other British colonies, such as India, to work on the plantations. This system ensured a steady supply of labor for the plantations. This influx of laborers led to a more diverse population on the islands. The cultural landscape of the Chagos Archipelago became a mosaic of different traditions and practices. In Mayotte, the French administration implemented similar economic policies, focusing on cash crop agriculture and exploiting the island's resources. The French aimed to maximize the economic output of their new colony. They established vanilla and sugar plantations, transforming the island's landscape and labor practices. These plantations required significant labor and altered the traditional ways of life on the island. The colonial period, for both the Chagos Archipelago and Mayotte, was marked by exploitation and the suppression of indigenous rights. The local populations faced harsh working conditions and limited freedoms. The French and British administrations imposed their laws, customs, and language on the local populations. This imposition led to significant cultural changes and the erosion of traditional practices. This period saw the gradual erosion of traditional ways of life as the colonial powers consolidated their grip on these island territories. The impact of colonial rule was profound and long-lasting. The seeds of future conflicts and struggles for self-determination were sown during these years of colonial domination. The legacy of colonial rule would shape the future of these islands for generations to come.
The mid-20th century brought about a dramatic and irreversible shift in the fate of the Chagos Archipelago, a group of islands in the Indian Ocean. In 1965, the United Kingdom, in a secretive and controversial agreement with the United States, detached the Chagos Archipelago from Mauritius, a move that would have far-reaching consequences. This decision, made without the knowledge or consent of the Chagosian people, paved the way for the establishment of a U.S. military base on Diego Garcia, the largest and most strategically significant island in the archipelago. The agreement marked the beginning of a dark and painful chapter in the history of the Chagosian people, who had lived on these islands for generations. Between 1967 and 1973, the British government forcibly removed the entire population of the Chagos Archipelago, uprooting them from their homes and livelihoods. Over 1,500 Chagosians were expelled from their homeland and shipped to Mauritius and Seychelles, where they faced an uncertain future. The British government justified this act by falsely claiming the islands were uninhabited and needed for strategic military purposes, a narrative that ignored the existence and rights of the Chagosian people. However, the forced removal of the Chagosians was a blatant violation of their human rights and international law, sparking outrage and condemnation from human rights organizations. The Chagosians, torn from their ancestral lands, faced immense hardship and discrimination in their new homes, struggling to adapt to unfamiliar environments. They were treated as second-class citizens, denied basic rights, and left to rebuild their lives in impoverished and often unwelcoming conditions, far from the islands they once called home. The trauma of displacement had a profound and lasting impact on the Chagosian community, fracturing families and severing their deep connection to their homeland, a bond that had been nurtured over centuries. The creation of the U.S. military base on Diego Garcia turned the island into a strategic outpost in the Indian Ocean, a key location for American military operations. The base, leased to the U.S. until 2036, became a vital asset for American military operations in the Middle East and beyond, playing a crucial role in global military strategy. The presence of the base, however, came at a steep human cost, as the Chagosians were left to grapple with the loss of their homeland and the injustices they had endured. The Chagosians, forcibly removed from their homes, became a forgotten people, their plight largely ignored by the international community, which often turned a blind eye to their suffering. Their struggle for justice and the right to return to their homeland continues to this day, as they fight to reclaim their identity and restore their connection to the Chagos Archipelago, a place they have never forgotten.
Mayotte's relationship with France took a different trajectory in the 20th century. As other French colonies in Africa gained independence, Mayotte's future remained uncertain. The island's unique position and its people's distinct choices would shape its path in a way that diverged from its neighbors. In 1974, a referendum was held in the Comoros Islands, of which Mayotte was a part, on the question of independence from France. The majority of the Comorian population voted for independence, seeking to establish their own national identity and governance. However, Mayotte's population overwhelmingly voted to remain under French rule. This decision to remain with France set Mayotte apart from the rest of the Comoros Islands. The Mahorais people felt a stronger connection to France, valuing the stability and opportunities it provided. In 1976, while the Comoros Islands gained independence, Mayotte retained its status as a French overseas territory. This move was met with condemnation from the Comorian government, which claimed sovereignty over Mayotte. The political tension between Mayotte and the Comoros would continue for decades. The international community, while acknowledging the results of the referendum, remained divided on the issue of Mayotte's status. In 2009, another referendum took place in Mayotte, reflecting ongoing debates and the island's evolving relationship with France. This time, the question was whether to become a French department, a status that would grant Mayotte greater autonomy and integration with France. The results were overwhelming, with the majority of the population voting in favor of becoming a department. This decision marked a significant milestone in Mayotte's history. This decision reflected a strong desire among the Mahorais people for closer ties with France and the benefits that came with it. Mayotte's transition to a French department in 2011 brought significant changes to the island, including improvements in infrastructure, healthcare, and education. It became an integral part of the French Republic, with access to European Union funding and infrastructure development. However, this integration also brought new challenges, as the island had to adapt to its new status and the responsibilities that came with it. Mayotte faced increased immigration from neighboring Comorian islands, putting a strain on resources and social services. The island also struggled to address issues of poverty, unemployment, and social inequality, despite its new status within France. The journey of Mayotte with France continues to be a complex and evolving story, marked by both progress and ongoing challenges.